Day 895 of the Trump administration. There could not be a more stark split screen on the eve of the nation's 243rd birthday. On the left, preparations for Trump's July 4th salute to America are underway on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. A celebration featuring tanks, military flyovers, and a speech from the commander-in-chief taking place as his administration is in the throes of a full-blown humanitarian crisis on the right of your screen on the nation's southern border. The president has promised, quote, our July 4th salute to America at the Lincoln Memorial is looking to be really big. It will be the show of a lifetime. The cost of our great salute to America tomorrow will be very little compared to what it's worth. We own the planes. We have the pilots. The airport is right next door, Andrews. All we need is the fuel. We own the tanks and all. Fireworks are donated by two of the greats. Nice. Democrats in Washington and the campaign trail have criticized the president's plans. Just a short time ago, the deputy White House press secretary had this response.
Now, look, it's pretty clear at this point that the Democrats in this country hate this president more than they love America. I was with the president for quite some time this afternoon talking about the speech, listening to him talk about the themes that he wants to address. And there's not a political bone in the entire speech.
NBC News has learned there is concern among some top military officials that tomorrow's event could put the armed forces in a position to be used politically, even though Pentagon lawyers gave the okay for participation and attendance. The New York Times also reports, quote, some retired and active duty military officers and privately, even some Defense Department personnel said the participation of the military in President Trump's salute to America appears to politicize the armed forces on a day when the nation traditionally toasts its independence in a nonpartisan environment. Earlier on this network, the mayor of Washington, D.C. expressed her apprehensions about tomorrow night.
This has been a nonpartisan, fun family event where people come from all walks of life, from all points of this region in the world to celebrate the fireworks. So we hope that the president will stick to that and not turn it into that. And we hope, too, that we never see the spectacle of our military force being on display as a show of force to our own people.
Now, Politico reports there's concern among White House aides about their ability to pull off what Trump expects to see. Reporter Nancy Cook, who joins me in a moment, writes, quote, White House and the Republican National Committee have spent the last week scrambling to distribute VIP tickets. White House officials and allies are wringing their hands over the risk of the hastily arranged event morphing into Trump's Inauguration 2.0, in which the size of the crowd and the ensuing media coverage do not meet the president's own outsized expectations for the event. They started this too late, and everyone has plans already, says Dan Eberhardt, a Republican donor. Once again, this is all happening as critics are slamming the administration for its handling of the situation at the southern border. Just yesterday, a Homeland Security Inspector General's report detailed the squalid, overcrowded, and dangerous conditions in which many migrants are being held. It quoted a senior border official who warned of the conditions being a ticking time bomb. This afternoon, amid preparations for his salute to America, the president defended his administration, writing, quote, our Border Patrol people are not hospital workers, doctors, or nurses. The Democrats' bad immigration laws, which could easily be fixed, are the problem. Many of these illegal aliens are living far better now than where they came from and in far safer conditions. If illegal immigrants are unhappy with the conditions in the quickly built or refitted detention centers, just tell them not to come. All problems solved. Late today, one House Democrat had a scathing response.
For him to say what he said today is virtually to concede by implication that, yeah, I deliberately made the conditions inhumane to try to discourage them from coming. The results, the consequences, the trauma, the actual deaths of people in our care be damned. And I think that's just a value no American should want to emulate or accept the day before our independence celebration.
Now, tonight it appears Trump may be inching closer to achieving another key goal, adding a question about citizenship to the 2020 census. And this comes after a stunning reversal by his own Justice Department. Yesterday, the Department of Justice agreed to leave that question off the form, a retreat that came after the Supreme Court froze the administration's plans to include that question. After a couple of angry Twitter messages from Trump and a conversation with a federal judge, Justice lawyers today changed course and announced that the White House is now seeking a way to restore that citizenship question to the census. Here for our leadoff discussion on a Wednesday night, Peter Baker, chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, the aforementioned Nancy Cook, White House reporter for Politico, and General Barry McCaffrey, a retired U.S. Army four-star general, a heavily decorated combat veteran of Vietnam, and a U.S. ground commander in the Gulf War, among other distinguished roles. Thanks to the three of you for getting us kicked off on a Wednesday night. Nancy, Donald Trump has been wanting to have something that feels like a military parade or a military display for more than 2 years now. Something is going to happen tomorrow, but there seems to be a good deal of chaos around the way this is being organized. What are you hearing in terms of the concerns?
Well, really what the concerns are that there's a question about will enough people show up. The White House and the Republican National Committee has all of these VIP seats that they've been trying to offload. Originally, they tried to give them to a bunch of high-end donors. Now I've been hearing, even tonight after I published the story today, that they're really willing to offload them to anyone. One White House staffer that I talked to late this afternoon took home 15 tickets and was just going to hand them out to whomever she could tomorrow. And the big concern on the part of the White House and the RNC is whether or not these seats will be filled. They don't want it to be like the inauguration where Trump ends up being really upset by the crowd size and then ends up sort of not giving the patriotic, non-political speech that so many advisors want him to give.
Right. And Peter, with respect to the inauguration, the president didn't have a lot of choices in how many people were actually going to show up. But because it didn't go his way, he sent out his then press secretary, Sean Spicer, to say this.
Photographs of the inaugural proceedings were intentionally framed in a way, in one particular tweet, to minimize the enormous support that had gathered on the National Mall. This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period. That's what you guys should be writing and covering.
Are we worried we're going to see something like that again?
Well, this is a president who obviously thinks a lot about crowd sizes. Even in the recent protests in Hong Kong, the thing that struck him, he said publicly, was the crowd size there. When Kamala Harris announced her candidacy for president, the thing he mentioned in an interview with my colleagues and me was her crowd size. It's something that's on his mind. So, yeah, you can be sure that he'll be watching very carefully to see how many people come tomorrow, and he will probably be making comparisons. If the crowds are good and if they're bad, then he'll be probably finding ways to, excuse that or blame it on other people, or maybe the weather will dampen the enthusiasm for it. But it really changes the nature of the event. I've grown up in Washington. I lived here, born here. Every year, my family and others and other families would go down to the mall, and it was not a political event. This is now forcing families to decide whether or not going to the mall constitutes a political act or not. And that's going to change the thinking for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, I'm, as you know, a naturalized American, and it's never occurred to me that July 4th was a political event, and now it becomes a question. General, the Washington Post, I want to describe to you how the Washington Post described President Trump's connection to the armed forces. Quote, more than any president in modern history, Trump has ignored the traditional norms intended to keep the armed forces out of partisan fights. He's dispatched U.S. troops to the southern border and even suggested that it would be acceptable for them to open fire on unarmed migrants. He's tweeted orders at top generals in a brazen end run around the traditional chain of command and regularly refers to America's fighting forces as my military. Trump's July 4th celebration has elevated his norm-defying behavior to new levels. Is this just norm-defying, or is there anything dangerous about it?
Well, we've never seen anything like this. Essentially, the commander-in-chief, and his only role as commander-in-chief, is over the 2.1 million men and women of the armed forces. There's a series of laws that govern the behavior. If he and the Secretary of Defense are the only two civilians who command the armed forces, the JCS don't. So he has broken all the guidelines, all the constraints He's used them in a political manner. And by the way, you're never going to find somebody that loves M1 tanks more than me.
Right.
I mean, they are just an incredible fighting machine, but we don't want our armed forces, to become a prop in what tomorrow will undoubtedly be another politically divisive day.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.